Okay, so first of all, a thank you to Deborah and Ray for sponsoring the Lunch and Learn today, and that is in honor of the yahrzeit of Deborah's mother. The name?
Sally Greenberg.
Sally Greenberg. The Hebrew name?
Sarah Bat Emmanuel.
Sarah Bat Emmanuel. Good. So the learning should be Le'iloi Nishmat, to help elevate the soul of Sarah Bat Emmanuel. And also we welcome back our dear friend Ida, that we missed you last week. It's good to have you back. Ida's husband Bob had a stroke, but thank God is doing much, much better. So Baruch Hashem. The fact that she's here today with us clearly shows that he's doing much better. And it's good to have you back with us, and welcome your daughter, Sari, also for joining us.
It's the Ruach that helps.
Okay. Okay, so today's topic is patience. And last week we focused on anger. And someone asked if I can, in a minute, summarize the whole thing on anger. And I got very upset now. Well, we are going to be touching on, the answer is I can't, but we are going to be touching on certain points that we mentioned briefly last week, because when discussing anger, I couldn't help myself but to bring up some ideas on how to help control that anger, and we'll be dealing with that. But I will reiterate the conclusion of last week's. I borrowed it for a second, if you don't mind. The last source we had, and by the way, it is on YouTube, on the Beth Jacob YouTube channel. The class from last week is up there, and if anybody wants the source sheet, let me know, and I'll be happy to email you a copy of the source sheet. But the last source we had was from the teaching of the Gemara, the Talmud Bavli, Darish Bar Kafra Ragzan will alta biado ela ragzanuta. Basically, when it comes to anger, Bar Kafra teaches all the person is left with is his anger, is his or her anger. Meaning, everyone else moves on, should move on, that person should move on, and basically there is this corrosive anger that a person can decide to keep inside of themselves, and that's their decision. But the only one I shouldn't say the only one that loses, but certainly the one who loses most from that decision. Often other people also are casualties along the way, tragically. But the one who loses the most is certainly that person. Okay, so I made a lot of copies. Everyone have a copy of today's source sheet? Okay. So one of the great paradigms of patience is the sage Hillel. Okay, and we'll go through a couple of Gemaras which tell the stories of Hillel's incredible patience. In Hebrew, patience is savlanut. Okay, and we'll see that actually the Hebrew word, as is always the case in Lashon HaKodesh, the Hebrew word and the shoresh, the root of that, gives us a lot of insight as to how one will hopefully can attain this midah of patience, which we understand, of course, is the other side of the coin of anger. Anger, we erupt into anger, and patience is we have that equanimity to take things slowly. And great athletes, so they'll say that the pitch as it came in, when they hit the game-winning fastball, the game-winning home run, actually it was a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but as it came, it seemed to slow down, and they ought to come right around and knock it out of the park, right? And in tennis, if it's in their wheelhouse, it's right where they're expecting it. Things seem to slow down, and patience, what we're doing is we are slowing down. Once we have slowed things down, we can almost pause and think, how is it that I would want to react to this situation? How would I want to look back tomorrow and say, oh, I handled that well? What can I do now to give me that ability to look back and say, good job, Ciner, or whatever we call ourselves in those moments, and say, I handled that one well. Patience slows things down. So famous, beautiful Gemara in Shabbos. Maaseh, b'shnei b'nei Adam, shimru zetzeh. Two people had a wager. Amru, kol mi she'elech v'yaknit Hillel. Whoever can get Hillel angry, to lose his cool, yitol arvnei zuz. Right? He'll get 400 zuz. Amar echem mehem ani aknitena. One of them said, you're on, game on. I will get him angry. Now, how much is 400 zuz? So we discussed yesterday in our Gemara class that a ketubah, a marriage document, is 200 zuz. How much is that? Well, we quoted from the Haggadah that Chad Gadya, one baby goat, was bought for 2 zuz. So I guess 400 zuz is about 200 goats. Okay, a serious amount. Oto Hayom, that day. Erev Shabbat Haya. It was Erev Shabbos. Now we know, actually the pasuk says, Lo tevaru eish b'chol moshvotechem. On Shabbos the fire should not burn in all your places of dwelling. So the Bali Musar say, I think maybe the Shlo, the Bali Musar, someone points out, that's talking about on Erev Shabbos, when the pressure starts to mount to get everything ready, and the eish, the fire of anger, should not burn in your houses. Friday is a busy, busy time. And Hillel was washing his hair, was showering, getting ready for Shabbos. He passed by the entrance of Hillel's house. He said, Mikan Hillel, Mikan Hillel. Is there anyone named Hillel here? Again, not the most respectful way of calling out. Anyone named Hillel? Anyone named Hillel? Nitatef. Hillel wrapped himself up, right? Again, he was showering, washing his hair, wrapped himself up. The Yatzlik wrote and went out to him. Amalon, he said to him, Bini, my son. Right there, we have an important, right? Much of what we say will influence how we are feeling inside. And if we could speak kindly, generously, warmly, then that will help also guide the feelings we're having inside. Bini, my son, ma tam mevakesh. What is it that you are seeking? Amalo she'elo yesh li lishol. I've got a question to ask. Amalo, he said to him, Sha'al bini. Once again, ask, my son. Sha'al, ask. And he asked, why do the Babylonians have these very round heads? Amalo, right, obviously a very silly question. Amalo, he said to him, Bini. Once again, my son. Right? And there's no indication that his teeth were gritted when he said, my son. Right? Actually, he said, my son. She'ela gedola sha'alta. That's a good question. That's a major question that you have asked. I'll tell you why. She'elam chayot pikrot. The midwives are not skillful, right? And it's interesting that right today we have all these new things. And when my kids were young, we used to lay the kids on their back. Now they say it's not good. It flattens out the back of the skull. Better to lay them on their side. I don't know exactly, but always changing, right?
Back on the back.
Back on the back. Back to the back. Fair enough. Stay tuned for next week. Okay, so he gave an answer. The Gemara goes on, and he said, right, and he left. He waited till he heard the shower going again. Came back and said, Miza Hillel, Mikan Hillel, and he asked the question about why certain people have eyes that are slanted. And Hillel said, oh, my son, great answer. He left. Right? Great question, gave an answer. He left, waited till he heard the shower was on again. Came back a third time. Why do these people have these big flat feet? He goes, oh, that's a great question. And he gives an answer. Finally, he said to him after these 2 questions, Amalo, she'elt harbi yesh l'shol. I got a lot of questions to ask. But I'm afraid that you might get angered. Nitatev, he wrapped himself and he sat down in front of him. Any questions that you have to ask, right? So much of the body language is important. He sat down in front of him, right? That's saying, I've got time, right? So if you're talking to someone, right, face the person. You're not angling to get away. He sat down. Anything you have to ask, ask. Amalo, he said to Matau Hillel Shekonat Chanasi Yisroel, are you the Hillel that is called the leader of Israel? Amalo, he said to him, Hein, yes. Amalo, he said, Imatahu, if that's who you are, Lo yirba kamotcha Yisroel. There shouldn't be many like you in Israel. Amalo, he said to him, Bini, once again, my son, Mipnei ma, Amar, Mipnei ma, right? Why are you saying that? Amalo, he said to him, Yadcha arba meyot zuz. Because I lost, because of you, 400 zuz. Now, the source doesn't have it, but Hillel's response was, better that you lose 400 zuz many times over than I lose my calm, that I would get angry. Another very famous case, very, very famous case of Hillel. And we see that, you don't want to give ownership to someone else. You want to be in control. And if this person is being annoying, this person is being short, this person, whatever they are, right? If you're going to fall in place, in a way you're giving them ownership over you. Their silliness and their comments can control you and your actions. And no one should have ownership over you besides yourself and the good Lord above us. That is who is meant to have ownership over us and our reactions. And people can push us, but we need to retain that control and that ownership. Now, and tremendous things come from it. Another very famous Gemara also in Shabbos. Masa b'nachri echad. A certain non-Jew came. Shabbat l'fnei Shammai. Amalo gaireni amunashi t'madeni kol Torah kula k'sheni omeid al regal achat. Right, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot. Dachvo. He pushed him out. Ba'amat abinyan, using a builder's measuring stick. He pushed him out. Now, understandably so. Right? Imagine that I go to a neurosurgeon and I say, teach me all about the brain and neurosurgery as I'm standing on one foot. It's an affront to him and to his studies and to the years and years and years that he's dedicated to becoming a top-level neurosurgeon. Balafnei Hillel, he came before Hillel, Gaire. Hillel converted him. Amalei, he said to him, Da'alach sani l'chavrecha lo ta'avid. What would be hated to you, what you wouldn't want someone to do to you, don't do to your neighbor. Don't do to someone else. Zoe kol Torah kula. That is the entire Torah. Idach. The rest is pirusha, is the explanation. Zeal, gamor. Go out and learn the rest. Liyamim. After some time, nizdavchu shloshim l'makam echad. The three. Right. There are other converts also. 3 converts. This is the third story. Right. This right. Amru. They said Kapten Otoshel Shammai. The strictness of Shammai, Biksha l'tardein min olam, right, almost pushed us out from the world. An v'tanuto shel Hillel, but Hillel's, it's translated here as gentleness. Actually, an v'tanuto means his humility. That is karvanu tachat kanfei hashchina. That is what brought us under the kanfei hashchina, under the wings of the divine presence. And humility is a very, very important component, right? Once a person gets into, how dare they speak to me like that, right? Once we capitalize the M-E of me, then we're bound to have problems because, right, no one could treat me with the respect that I fully deserve, right? If that's where we're starting from, then we're bound to run into problems.
That was Moshe's great characteristic, humility.
That is correct. Moshe was known, that is correct, as the Anav Mikol Adam. Right? So, right, again, right, the humility over here and the patience is, besides controlling himself, that is what brought others near and lifted up others in the process. Rav Simcha Zissel of Kelem, our third source, in Chachma Umusar, he writes there, Mi yitain, if only the nitragel, if we get accustomed, and we'll soon see some ideas on becoming accustomed, right? Muscle memory over here in terms of our reactions to things. B'midat hasaval, in this attribute of patience. Izeh shoresh kol hamidot. He says this is the very foundation, the root, the source of all good character traits. Vaha minucha. And that is what gives a person that inner serenity, that calm. Right? It's good for your health, physical health, emotional health, mental health, and for that of all those around you. Vashoresh kol hama'alot, and is the root, they translate, of all virtue. Ma'alot is something that is Allah, that is uplifted, that is high and good, right? That is uplifted. Let's go with that.
Like Shir HaMalot?
Like Shir HaMalot, a song to the ascents, right? And if we want to accomplish, if we want to get our point across, as Shlomo HaMelech says in Kohelet, Divrei Chachamim benachat nishma'in. The words of the wise, benachat, when they're spoken in a gentle manner, nishma'in, they are heard. Miza'akat moshel biksilim. Then the cries of a fool, of a ruler, baksilim, amongst the fools. So we all know what we want to do. We all know how we want to react to different situations. So let's go now to some practical advice that we have from times, for generations. Ramban, he wrote his Igeret HaRamban, right? Beautiful, beautiful letter, right? Shema b'ni, listen, my children, right? And he's giving them pathways for life. And he says, Titnaheg tamid, always accustom yourself, Lidaber kol dvarecha, to speak all of your words, benachat, gently, lekol adam, to every person, uvechol eit, at all times, uvazet hinatzel menakas, and that will help protect you, save you literally, from anger, shehi mida ra'ah, which is a very serious character flaw, lachti b'nei adam, which leads us to do so many things that miss the mark, right? Chet, sin, actually is a
Avera.
Yeah, right. You have missed the mark.
Rabbi, what is a garret? It's a letter?
It's a letter. Yeah. Actually, I think Art Scroll or Feldheim, one of them has a whole book of that he made out of this letter of the Ramban, of Ramban, and beautiful, beautiful explanations
Rabbi?
on each aspect of it.
The one moment that Moshe lost his patience.
Yeah.
That moment. That was it.
Yeah.
And God told him he couldn't go to the promised land.
Correct. Yeah. Now, Rambam, Maimonides, right? So when he discusses midot, character traits, he's always known for that the golden rule, the middle of the road. Not too much this way, not too much that way. But he says there is an exception. Source number 6. The Rambam writes, V'yesh deot. So even though normally he says, don't be too stingy, right? Don't be too loose with your money, right? Find the middle ground with each thing. He says, find the middle ground. Here he says, V'yesh deot, there are certain character traits, she'asur lo la'adam linhog behen b'beinoniot, that a person cannot take that middle path. Ela yitrachek min hakatzeh achad ad hakatzeh acher. You have to distance yourself from one edge, right, to the other extreme. Hakas, anger. Mida ra'ahi ad lima'od. It is a terrible character trait. One has to go to the opposite extreme to teach himself even something that might be justifiably anger causing, to not allow yourself to get angry. And Rav Volbe, the Zatzal, who was the mashkiach of the mashkichim, right? Mashkiach here, of course, I don't mean one who supervises the kashrut, but one who supervises the spiritual growth. Right? In a yeshiva is known as the mashkiach. So my mashkiach, Yisroel Blumenfeld, his mashkiach was Rav Volbe, and Rav Volbe was the mashkiach of many, many mashkichim. And in his classic Alei Shur, where many of you have heard or participate in these different musarvads,
yes.
And very often they'll draw from the Alei Shur. He writes, Nitlamed Efo, let's train ourselves, let's learn liot savlanim, to be patient. Nikva latzmeinu zman musuyam kol yom. He says in a very practical way, set up a certain time period every day, kareva sha'ah, all of 15 minutes. And you might say, oh, that's no big deal. But he always, right, you always start with a small amount that's attainable, and then you could work on expanding it. But those 15 minutes, and during that time, strive that we'll be patient with whatever we see, whatever we hear. Even though something happened that normally our reaction would be to blow our cool, to lose it. Even if something that's hurtful to us, that during this time period you could set your phones to a 15-minute timer and know for these 15 minutes I am Mr. Cool, Calm, and Collected. No matter what happens, right? And it should not be from like 3 a.m. to 3:15 a.m., right? But it should be right during the time that we do have interactions with others. Right? And in a case where we do have to respond, nagiv b'dvarim shkulim u'medudim. We will resolve to answer with very measured, calm words. B'li shum hit rag shut. Without becoming emotional, without losing our cool. And that is the muscle memory that I mentioned before. Right? In sports, you want to do a certain shot, you want to just practice that it becomes natural with our midot also, with our reactions. If we can go through that, then we learn that, we integrate that into who we are, into what we do, and that gives us the ability to expand also beyond those 15 minutes.
An exercise that I've learned is 5 minutes, and it's look at your watch. Let's say you're online at the supermarket, and the person in front of you has all these coupons and all sorts of things, and you're starting to get angry. You look at your watch and you say, I'll give it 5 minutes. 5 minutes is, and I've done this many times, not necessarily every time at the supermarket, but situations. And you just sort of, it's very simple. And 5 minutes, and you look and you wait. And it's amazing how in 5 minutes, something very annoying could just dissipate. It's just gone.
Nice.
15 minutes to me is a very long time, actually.
Yeah.
It's a very long time.
I think the way I understand what you're saying is, right, it's not that most of us are so careful with every 5 minutes of our day. No. And rarely will the person in front take more, than, yeah.
But if you do it even once a day, the next time you do it, it's okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned before about the meaning, the Hebrew meaning of the word patience, which we said was savlanut. There's a beautiful piece here. How can a person successfully work toward uprooting anger? Thank you very much. One needs to recognize the root cause of anger and how to manage it. Right? A person's wants and desires, or ratzon, will, are at the core of who a person is and his greatest or her greatest drive. The reason why anger is so difficult to control is that one is angered by a situation which goes directly against one's ratzon or desires. the anger is triggered because the situation is going against me. The opposite of anger is patience. The Hebrew word for patience is savlanut. A saval is one who carries, which means to bear something, to carry it. Patience is bearing the burden of one's own ratzon or desires. I can carry that. I don't need to impose that. The goal of dealing with anger is being able to bear the burden of something that goes against your will. And this is something that takes, as Rav Volbe suggested, that takes practice and it takes discipline. Right? We know that Rav Moshe Feinstein, of blessed memory, was known for his calmness and his patience. And when a yeshiva student asked him about that, Rav Moshe made it clear it was not a natural state of his, and it did not come quickly or easily. It is years that I have worked on this trait, was his response. Someone once hid under the bench in the shul of the Chafetz Chaim to see what the Chafetz Chaim did when he was in there alone at night. And he saw midnight approach. The Chafetz Chaim went, opened up the Aron Kodesh, and prayed that Hashem should help him to overcome any feelings of anger. So, realize that even people who you might see as being, oh, that person is so calm, they didn't necessarily start out that way. And chances are they had to work on themselves to achieve that. And therefore it is something that is attainable. And to put ourselves, not put ourselves in those situations, but to give some time, as Rav Volbe suggested, that is dedicated towards, during this time, this is my anger or frustration-free zone. Something that I know has worked for me, that I will share, is very often there are certain situations that do it to us, right? Or if not certain situations, there's a situation where we lost it. And what I've done a number of times is to sit back afterwards and say, Ciner, you blew it royally, but what should you have done, right? It caught you unaware, it didn't slow down in time, it was a fastball coming in at 96 miles an hour, and you struck out royally over there. Okay, but now it's not coming at you. Now you're calm, now you're not under pressure. So, what should you have done? Let's slow it down now. What should you have done? And work it through. Whether it's a situation that we find ourselves in often, certainly do that, or a situation that we don't find ourselves often, but it just came at us. What should you have done? And then you've got that in your library. Story I've told before. My parents were living in Israel. My parents were living in Israel. I was living in Israel. They came and they were there for a number of months. They were going back to the States. I didn't have a car. I took a sheirut, one of the cabs in, and I was there to meet them at their apartment, spent some time with them, and then brought their suitcases downstairs, and was there to help load it onto the sheirut that was taking them to the airport. All good, right? The cab driver pulls up, and he's in a crazy rush, and he starts yelling at them to rush, this, that, right? And the bags are too big, and my parents are older people, they have two small suitcases, and you're in airport service, you have to expect two suitcases, right? And I lost it. And I started yelling at the guy. I said, they're older people, they're getting as quickly as they can, and the bags are not so big, and you have to expect this. So he's yelling at me, I'm yelling back at him, right? We load the bags, I kiss my parents goodbye, they pull off, and I say to myself, Ciner, you crazy idiot. Your parents are going back to the States now, and the picture they have of their son, the rabbi in Israel, is you and a cab driver duking it out in the street over there. So I said that was terrible. So on the way back, I was so upset with myself, and I said, what should I have done? And everyone can come up with a different situation that works for them. What I came up with myself was, when he came down and he came out yelling, I shouldn't have said a word to him. I should have said loudly to my parents, he must be under a lot of pressure and in a rush. Let me help him load the suitcases up. Right? I'm not engaging him. Don't engage him. Right? Give him the benefit of the doubt. Speak kindly about him. Right? And then just take care of the problem. Right? That way the guy's not going to say, no, I'm not in a rush. I just like yelling at older people. Right? The guy's obviously not going to engage me. That's what I should have done. And I filed that away for myself. Everyone else can say something else they feel they should have done. I felt for me that would have been the best response. And it wasn't a month or two later that I was in a grocery store with a close friend of mine who was visiting from the States. He wanted to spend time with me. I said, I have to go shopping. Come with me, right? And we're shopping, and it was a big store, crowded store, one of these, bargain places, but it's not enough room for the carts. And as I'm pushing my cart, I clipped a bag, and I pulled out a bottom bag of noodles, and everything else followed afterwards. I made a big mess there. Right? And the guy was working, filling the bag, stocking the shelves. I knocked down a bunch of bags. Right? And the guy starts to yell at me. Right? Right? So I said to him, Slicha, slicha. I apologize. I turned to my friend and said to him in Hebrew, I feel so bad. He's working so hard, doing such a good job. And my clumsiness made a mess. Let's take time and let's help him restock the shelves. And we both got down and started loading it up. Right? And the guy became my personal shopper. For the rest of the trip, he was following my friend and I. And he overheard me saying, where are the diapers? Oh, chitulin. Right? This line over there. Right? But whatever that happened or not, right? I had the opportunity to sit down, think about it. When a similar situation came, I was ready for it. And we all have, situations that often get under our skin that we can think about. And if we don't have that, if we're blessed not to have that, then nevertheless we all have times that we have lost it, and we haven't reacted in the way that we would like to react. And then a person needs to think, okay, what can I do better? What can I do better about that?
Savlanut, that's the motto in Israel.
Yeah, Savlanut. You got to carry it. Rebbe Tversky, source number 9, she writes beautifully, all of our behaviors and emotion and expressions of emotions are preceded by thought. Our take in any given situation we confront begins with the way we perceive it. There's no objective reality at play. What is the fact that one day a given situation undoes us, and the very same set of circumstances that doesn't faze us at another time? We are the interpreters. We are the thinkers. That's what I said before, right? Don't give anyone else ownership. We are in control of how we perceive something. Awareness of this fact should allow us to step back. We have one of those negative thoughts attacking that sparks anger, and ask ourselves if this is the bus we want to take. Amen. We have the wherewithal, if we so choose, to drop the contaminating thought and move on, thereby making room for the clear thinking of our innate wisdom, the better part of ourselves. So number one is, it's all perspective, and we choose how we're going to view something, how it's going to get under our skin or not. A second component of this approach is that, generally speaking, when we feel affronted or take offense, it is about me. And this we discussed last week. We often think it's about me, right? And when it's about me, right, I'm taking it personally. Rarely is it about us. I feel targeted. My ego is bruised. The anger is a defense of my ego. In reality, the affront that seems to be personal is rarely about us. Right. The inappropriate behavior of the other, which triggers our hurt and subsequent anger, generally comes from a place of insecurity in the person who is provoking us. If we are able to recognize this truth, we will find a port in the storm. A beautiful, beautiful idea, number 10. If one lost a beautiful flower, it would be madness for him to react by breaking a precious object worth thousands of times more than the small flower. Similarly, the person who loses his temper shatters his peace of mind, a commodity far more precious than the relatively trivial loss which triggered which triggered that anger. Now, we discussed last week the idea that a person who gets anger, it's like serving idols. And we explained, even though that seems to be right, a bizarre comparison, but we explained that anger comes from this shouldn't have happened. And if I were running the show, I would have done a better job. I wouldn't have let this happen. Well, as we know, God is running the show. So if my anger is that I would have done better, differently and better, then in a way that is very much like idolatry. That there is I'm worshiping something that could run the world better than God. And that something is none other than yours truly. Right? And that's why we get angry. Rav Nemezal brings beautifully, as we just recently read in the Parashah past, about Yosef. Right? I'll take it right in English because it's getting a little bit late. Yosef teaches us a great principle of how we can fulfill the difficult instruction to not bear a grudge. We might be able to restrain ourselves from taking revenge. How is it possible to not even bear a grudge against somebody who does us evil? Like the Torah says, lo tikom v'lo titor. Lo tikom is do not actively take revenge. But that's not enough. It says don't harbor the animosity, the anger in your heart. We might think as long as I don't react on it, that's great. Well, that's one step. But that's not anywhere near where we want to get to. That means it's still corrosively eating away at you and eventually at others. Yet, if we understood that the person did not do anything, there is no longer room to bear a grudge. If you would not have sold me to Egypt, Yosef says, God would have sent somebody else to do it. If I ended up in Egypt, it meant the master plan had me in Egypt. Therefore, it's not you that did it. You were the instrument through which it happened. If you used your free will to be the instrument, that's between you and God. But in terms of the way that it affected me, it's not you. Your actions didn't do this. And this is a reason for not bearing a grudge, to realize that only God makes things happen. God thought it for the good. Yosef calms his brothers. Moreover, everything that God does is for the good, as we learned in Brachot. If so, there is no room left to bear a grudge. Rav Nemezal continues, Yosef even felt gratitude toward his brothers, for in their merit he became ruler over Egypt. Considering her sale, it was apparent that this led to, as he says, quote, sustaining a great nation. However, the truth is that the same is true for every person. It's not just Yosef and every case. If somebody harms you, heaven forbid, know first of all that it is from God. Second of all, that ultimately good will come of it. Will you necessarily see that good right away? No. Will you necessarily ever see that good in this world? No. Even in the case of Yosef, it took a full 22 years until it became clear that God meant it for the good. Yes, Steve?
It's the same message that Mordecai gives to Esther about approaching Ahasuerus.
Excellent. Excellent. Right, if you'll step up, fine. If not, if they're meant to be saved, they will get saved. Right? It's up to you, right, to use to play that role. The Chavetz Chaim gives a beautiful mashal that sometimes we get upset when we expected someone to do something for us and they did not come through. And he compares it that you come to a town and you're looking for someone by the name of Shmuel. So I go over to Ray and I say, Ray, are you Shmuel? And Ray says, no, I'm not Shmuel, I'm Ray. Right? And I get angry. Well, why aren't you Shmuel? Right? Obviously that is just silly. Either he is or he isn't. So Chavetz Chaim says if you expected someone to be the one who will give you, who will do something for you, and they don't, then that person is not Shmuel. Finished. Right? That's not the one. That person is not the one. If you're meant to get it, you're going to get it. If you're not meant to get it, you won't get it. But it's not that person's decision who is going to make the call for you.
Rabbi?
Yes.
But many psychologists say that most of Western humanity, maybe it's a cultural thing, but if there's tragedy or a really extreme challenge, people go through stages like, and one of them is anger. And if that's so universal, isn't that what Hashem has made our makeup?
Well, if there wouldn't be a tendency towards that, there wouldn't be a command not to take revenge and not to bear animosity, right? Right? Those are often normal initial reactions, and we need to work on that. It's something that we need to work on. We need to try to.
We need to work on it. With every word, from what I understand, you have to suppress it, you have to hold it, you have to suppress it.
No. I'm not talking about suppressing it. That's corrosive, right?
No.
We're talking about having a different perspective on it, recognizing that it's coming from God, and doing our best. We mentioned last week, we're discussing anger, right? If I know that a curveball is coming, it's a lot easier to hit that curveball, right? If I know something's going to come my way, prepare myself for it. I know my interaction with this person leads towards my anger. Prepare myself beforehand. What do I do that might trigger that? Right? How can I react better when it comes at me, right? And at the core, to have this recognition that God is running the world. For whatever reason, I need to be dealing with this situation now, and I'm not going to allow myself, right, as we had in the Sefer Hasidim, I'm not going to tear up something worth a lot more than what is causing me this anger. Now, sometimes the anger could be not trivial things, right?
Yeah,
it could, right? It could be deaths in the family. It could be, right? It could be, small children being left without a, right? There are many things out there, right? But I saw a beautiful idea that when a person is dealing with the tragedies of life, right, with the death, and remember correctly, imagine a child has a younger sibling, right, and here's the child, and here's the younger sibling crying, and gets nervous, right, and goes into the room and sees the child's not there. And now the sibling really starts to freak out. And they go into the parents' room and they see that the parents are embracing that child, holding that child. The person feels completely at ease then, right? And I think Rav Bullman wrote this. I'm not sure. I think Rav Nachman Bullman Zatzal wrote this, right? That when tragedies strike and we lose someone, and we don't see that person, and it's like we're going into that room, right? And the person's not there, and we feel just completely devastated. To recognize that the person's not there, but where is that person, right? In the embrace of Hashem. And there are different ways that we need to try to look at things, and certainly life throws curveballs. And there are situations which are tragic, right? And look, right? And I'm always, I try to be careful. Even though when I hear something, my reaction is, "Oh, that's terrible." I work hard on not allowing myself to say that's terrible, but I'll say that is so sad. That is so tragic, but not to say that is terrible, because our belief is that God is running the world, and if to the degree that we could wrap our heads around that and make that a part of who we are and how we see things, that to a great degree is the equanimity and strength that a person will have when they're dealing with the real tough things. Let's just do 12 and 13. I'll take all the questions. I just want to keep everybody. So, number 12, from the Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi from the Tanya. Anyone gets angry, so as if he served idolatry, as we mentioned. The reason for this is that when a person is enraged, his emunah departs from him.
Exactly.
For if he would believe that everything comes from God, he would not be angered at all, even though the person who hit or cursed him did so out of free will, and he is liable under law of both the human and divine courts. That's that person's issue. Nonetheless, concerning the damaged party, when it comes to me, who was on the receiving end, it has already been decreed from heaven, and God has many messengers. Furthermore, even at the very moment the person curses or strikes, he receives his strength from God, who constantly gives him life and existence. Therefore, he's not working beyond. Lastly, the Choseh of Lublin, Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak, once wanted to get up early in the morning to take care of an important matter. The day before, he asked his wife to prepare the evening meal earlier than usual so that he'd be able to get to sleep earlier and get up earlier the next day to take care of this important matter, which was bound to be an important mitzvah matter. But it turned out that the meal was prepared much later than usual. He commented it would be natural for me to become angry, but the only reason I wanted to have the meal early was to do the will of my Creator. This too is the will of my Creator, that I should not become angry.
Very nice.
Yes,
Beautiful.
we had a couple over here who were waiting. No? I'm sorry.
You already answered my
I did.
question, which
Okay.
This is a different form of anger. We read it in the Torah, at least the English translation, that God is an angry God and he gets angry. Now we know that anger is not it's not a human trait that we desire. And we know that it causes a lot of pain and suffering, and it's of no value. Yet often in the text, you see the word God is an angry God. And I never think of God as an angry God, but
I don't think there's a text that says God is an angry God.
Or God gets angry. The word
There's a difference.
association with
There's
God
a-
and anger.
Okay.
God and anger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I haven't reconciled that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent point you bring up, Chai Rivka.
Even the attribute of God, it's a קשה לכעוס ונוח לרצות. It means it's hard to get angry, but it doesn't mean that God will not get angry or there's no anger.
Right, so the
I
Sabra
think
Ta'ozen.
the secret is קשה לכעוס. You have to know how to be angry. Even the Rambam, Igrot Rambam, he was very angry that they kicked him out of Spain. He had to run away to Egypt. The rabbi mistreated. We forget about it. But what he did, he didn't fight with them like you exactly said about the taxi driver. He sent them igrot. He sent letters.
Yeah.
He advertised it so everybody knew about his anger.
And I would just add on that there's this idea of anthropomorphism, right? Is God is using terms, right, human terms, so that we can relate to it, right? Now, the anger of the Torah is invariably in cases of idolatry, avodah zarah, right? Idolatry is the ultimate betrayal, okay, right? We've mentioned how in the Ten Commandments there's the between us and God and between us and man that's aligned, right? And avodah zarah, the second one, is aligned with adultery. Right, which is the betrayal of a relationship. So my understanding is that the Torah uses this harshest term of anthropomorphism for us to understand just what a tremendous betrayal it is. If the God who is giving us life and vitality every moment, right, if we take that life, that gift, that strength, that breath, that heartbeat, and use that to turn our back and to reject him, that is the greatest slap in the face. And therefore the Torah uses this starkest of terms of anthropomorphism for us to understand just what a betrayal is taking place. Now, there also are times, the Gemara discusses, there are times when one might need to appear to be angry.
Yes, I've heard stories.
Right? Appear to be angry, but inside and not be angry. right? At times a person might need to really show just how serious this is and appear to be angry, but don't actually be angry, right? If you're angry, like we mentioned last week, right, it's like the Gemara commands, like being drunk, which means you're not really in control of measured reactions, and chances are your reaction is not going to be properly calibrated, and it'll be off the mark.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Thank you.
So how come Hashem left it to Yaakov to rebuke the brothers for Dinah? Wasn't that done out of anger?
Where do we see it was out of anger?
The slaying of Shechem.
Where do we see it was done out of anger, though?
Well,
right? Rebuke. Sometimes rebuke needs to be given.
Right. No. I'm talking about the action of slaying all the Shechemites.
I don't think that was. I don't know that was done out of anger. The Mefarshim explained the calculation that they made why there was a death penalty on that town. Right? We don't see. I don't think there's any scripture, any textual indication of anger. Now we might look and say, "Oh, they must have been really angry," but that's what we're sticking in. Yes,
What
Colin.
about Pinchas?
Okay, good. So Pinchas, right, actually is fascinating. By Pinchas, it doesn't say anger. It says kano et kinati. He avenged my vengeance, right? And that is we have to be very careful. Are we doing it for God's honor, or are we doing it for our own honor? And there, the pasuk actually testifies that it was kano et kinati. His jealousy was for me. His jealousy was for me, and it wasn't personal, right? Yes, Yochai.
When Moshe came down from Har Sinai, the first time.
Yeah, right. I don't know if it said. Right, there are places where it says that Moshe got angry, and wherever I'm not sure if it actually mentions anger over there, but wherever it does mention anger, Chaim Shmulevitz has a beautiful, beautiful piece on this. That wherever it mentions that he got angry, he lost out because of it.
Right.
Right.
Big time.
He lost out because of it. Yeah. Look, if that's any consolation, Moshe also struggled with it. Okay, so that's important when it comes to our saying, okay, right? I'm not going to throw in the towel if I've messed up a few times, but our reaction should not be, hey, if Moshe struggled with it, so therefore I could just be an angry, irate person who lashes out all the time.
So, Rabbi, is this an absolute that you're referring to, never to be angered? Say a parent walks in on a nanny who is shaking their baby. Wouldn't the correct response, the appropriate response, be anger?
No. The correct response might be to appear to be angry, but the correct response, when we're angry, right, we're not fully in control of our reactions. I can't imagine anyone would say that it's best to not be fully in control of our reactions at any given point. Now, I could be very upset, right? And I could be angry at what they have. I could be angry. I'm trying to put it right. I need to react very strongly to make sure this person is never a nanny again, right? And to make sure law enforcement, right, if this is criminal, is involved, right? And make sure I do all the things necessary for that child, right? But again, anger is something, right? When we're drunk, we don't calibrate our actions properly. When we're angry, it's like, right, the blood is rushing, and we spoke before about slowing things down. Anger just speeds things up, right? So at that point, now you have to react very strongly and harshly and protectively for that child, but you want to be fully in control when you're making your decisions, certainly those split-second decisions right then and there. You really want to be in control and do what is best and most effective right at that time. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. And once again, a thank you to the Glassers, to Deborah and Ray for sponsoring this week.
In the merit of lunch today?
we still have more like Shabbat,